The ground shook and the parking garage collapsed, trapping my team inside. I grabbed my gear, ready to lead the rescue, but my boss blocked my path. He fired me on the spot, citing liability issues, while my friends screamed for help under tons of concrete. He thought he was protecting the company, but he didn't know I was the only one certified to save them. The first thing you notice isn't the sound, it's the silence of the birds. I was standing on the south perimeter of the Meridian Heights project, a 40-story luxury complex that was already 3 months behind schedule. At 45, I had spent half my life on construction sites and the other half crawling through the wreckage of them. As the site's safety officer, my job was usually boring, checking harnesses, yelling about hard hats, and logging hydration breaks. But my resume had a section Gabriel White, the project director, had clearly never bothered to read. 20 years as a FEMA structural specialist with Urban Search and Rescue USAR. "Claire, we need that inspection signed off by noon," Gabriel's voice crackled over the radio. He didn't ask, he demanded. Gabriel was 32, wore Italian loafers to a demolition zone, and treated the safety code like a suggestion box. "The concrete in Sector 4 hasn't cured, Gabriel," I replied, pressing the talk button on my shoulder mic. "If we load the cranes there, we risk microfractures." "Microfractures don't pay the interest on the loans, Claire. Sign it." I looked up at Sector 4. William, our foreman, was up there with a crew of 6, including Quinn, a bright-eyed engineering intern who reminded me of myself 20 years ago. She waved at me from the scaffolding, her bright yellow vest catching the morning sun. Then, the birds stopped singing. The vibration started in the soles of my boots. It wasn't the rhythmic thrum of a pile driver. It was a deep, nauseating roll, like the earth was trying to shrug us off. Earthquake. I screamed, my voice tearing through the sudden stillness. "Clear the structure. Now, move." It happened in slow motion and fast forward all at once. The unfinished luxury tower swayed. The steel skeleton groaned, a sound like a dying whale screeching metal against metal. Then came the roar. Sector 4 didn't just crack, it disintegrated. The uncured concrete gave way under the weight of the staging equipment. I watched helpless as 3 floors of the parking structure, where the site office and the break room were located, pancaked downward. Dust, thick and choking, billowed out like a bomb blast. It turned the bright morning into a gray twilight in seconds. "Quinn, William." I was already running toward the pile before the debris settled. My training kicked in instantly. The panic that paralyzed the other workers didn't touch me. I went cold, analytical. I was assessing void spaces, load paths, and potential secondary collapses while everyone else was just trying to breathe. I reached the edge of the collapse zone. It was a chaotic mess of twisted rebar and slab concrete. "Help, someone help us." The voice was muffled, coming from deep within the gray mountain. It sounded like William. I tapped my radio. "Mayday, Mayday, this is Martin. Sector 4 collapse, multiple entrapments. Initiate mass casualty protocol." Silence, then static. "Claire," Gabriel's voice came back, but it wasn't panicked. It was annoyed. "Stop broadcasting on the emergency channel. You're panic-mongering. It's a localized failure." I stared at the mountain of rubble where Quinn had been standing 10 seconds ago. "Localized. Gabriel, half the garage is gone. We have people trapped." "Stay put," he ordered. "Do not enter the zone. I'm coming down." I didn't stay put. I started climbing. The dust tasted like copper and old chalk. I pulled my N95 mask up. I always kept one in my pocket, a habit from the old days, and scrambled over a slab of tilted concrete. "William, sound off." I shouted into a gap between 2 slabs. "Claire." His voice was weak, terrified. "My leg, I can't move it. Quinn is here, she's not waking up." "Okay, listen to me," I said, my voice steady. "Don't try to move. Don't yell unless you hear rescuers. Conserve oxygen." I was already scanning the pile. This was a Linta collapse. The floor had failed at one end, creating a triangular void space against the retaining wall. It was unstable, terrifyingly so. If a rescue team went in without shoring up the slab, the whole thing would slide and crush everyone inside. I pulled out my laser distance measurer and a can of spray paint to mark the safe entry points. I was calculating the load ratios in my head. What do you think you're doing? I turned. Gabriel White was standing at the edge of the caution tape, his pristine white hard hat looking ridiculous against the devastation. He was holding a phone, filming the damage. I'm marking the structural stability for the fire department, I said, not stopping. William and Quinn are alive. We need a crane to stabilize this slab, and we need it now. Call the operator. Stop, Gabriel said, stepping over the tape. He wasn't looking at the trapped workers, he was looking at me. You are the safety officer, Claire. Your job is prevention. This has already happened. Now it's a liability scene. It's a rescue scene, Gabriel. They are breathing down there. And if you go crawling in there and a rock falls on your head, the company gets sued for another wrongful death, he snapped. I've already called corporate legal. They said lock it down. No unauthorized personnel in the collapse zone. I am authorized. I yelled, losing my cool. I have a level 1 USAR certification. I've run FEMA task forces in 3 states. I am the most qualified person in this entire city to be on this pile right now. He sneered. It was a subtle, ugly curl of his lip. You're a site safety monitor, Claire. We hired you to check fire extinguishers. We didn't hire you to play superhero. Get off the pile. No, I turned back to the void. William, hang tight. I'm coming down to assess the shoring. I took a step toward the gap. Security, Gabriel shouted. 2 burly guards, men I shared coffee with every morning, hesitated at the perimeter. Remove Ms. Martin from the site immediately, Gabriel ordered, pointing a shaking finger at me. She is trespassing. The absurdity of it hit me like a physical blow. The dust was settling, revealing the true horror of the trap my friends were in, and this man was worried about insurance adjusters. Gabriel, I said, lowering my voice to a dangerous whisper. If you remove me, they die. Fire and rescue won't be here for 20 minutes. The roads are likely jammed. That slab is shifting. It needs to be shored now. I don't care about your hero complex, he hissed, stepping close enough that I could smell his expensive cologne over the dust. Rescue techs don't freelance on my site. You are a liability. Get out. The ground beneath us gave a sickening lurch and aftershock. Debris rained down from the upper stories. I instinctively crouched, covering my head. Gabriel yelped and scrambled backward, tripping over a piece of rebar and landing on his backside in the dirt. From inside the pile, Quinn screamed. It was a high, terrified sound that cut right through me. The slab moved. William shouted from the darkness. Claire, it's crushing us. I stood up, ignoring Gabriel. I grabbed a loose 4x4 timber from a scattered pile of lumber nearby. It wasn't perfect, but I could wedge it as a temporary strut to stop the slide. Claire, don't you dare. Gabriel scrambled to his feet, dusting off his suit. You are terminated. Do you hear me? You are fired for insubordination and safety violations. You are no longer an employee of Meridian Construction. I hefted the timber onto my shoulder. I don't care about the job, Gabriel. I moved toward the gap again. If you touch that debris, Gabriel shouted, his voice cracking, I will have you arrested for trespassing and reckless endangerment. I will sue you for every penny you have. I will ruin you. Make the smart choice, Claire, walk away. He signaled the security guards again. This time, they moved. One of them, a guy named Miller who I knew had 2 kids, looked at me with apologetic eyes. I'm sorry, Claire, Miller said, grabbing my arm. He's the boss, you have to go. Miller, listen to me, I pleaded, struggling against his grip. The slab is at a 40-degree angle. Friction is the only thing holding it. If the wind blows hard, it slides. I need to wedge this timber. Get her off the property, Gabriel screamed. Now, or you're fired too, Miller. Miller tightened his grip. Come on, Claire, don't make me drag you. I looked back at the pile. I could hear William sobbing now. He was a tough man, a veteran foreman, and he was crying for his mother. I'll be back, I whispered, though I knew they couldn't hear me. I dropped the timber. It hit the dust with a dull thud. Gabriel stood there, chest heaving, fixing his tie. Escort her to the gate, take her badge, and if she comes within 500 feet of this site, call the police. I was marched across the chaotic site like a criminal. Other workers watched, their faces pale and confused. I saw the union rep standing by the portable toilets on his phone, looking everywhere but at me. As we reached the gate, the sirens finally started wailing in the distance. They were miles away, fighting through gridlock traffic. Miller took my badge. "I really am sorry, Claire." "It's not your fault, Miller," I said, my voice hollow. I looked back at the rising dust cloud, at the tomb where my friends were trapped. Gabriel White thought he had solved a liability problem. He thought firing me was the end of it. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my personal phone. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a cold, simmering rage. I dialed a number I hadn't used in 6 years. "State Emergency Operations Center," a crisp voice answered. "Put me through to Director Clark," I said. "Tell him it's Bridge Jumper calling." There was a pause. "Ma'am, the director is handling a statewide emergency." "Tell him it's Claire Martin," I cut in. "And tell him I'm at the Meridian collapse, and tell him—" I looked through the chain-link fence at Gabriel, who was now frantically waving at a news helicopter circling overhead. "Tell him I have a situation that requires a fixer." The line went dead in my hand as the cell towers overloaded. The entire network was crashing under the weight of 1,000,000 panicked calls. No, no, no. I stared at the screen, willing the bars to reappear. Nothing. SOS only. I stood outside the chain-link perimeter of the Meridian site, clutching the fence with white-knuckled hands. Inside, chaos reigned. The first fire trucks were arriving, sirens wailing like banshees, but they were struggling to navigate the debris-clogged access road. Gabriel White was screaming at a fire captain, waving his arms toward the office trailer instead of the collapse zone. He was prioritizing the server backups over human lives. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear the fence down with my bare hands. But 20 years in rescue had taught me one thing above all else: panic kills. If I was going to help Quinn and William, I had to be cold. I had to be strategic. I forced myself to walk away. Not far, just to my truck parked down the street. It was an old F-150, dented and scarred, filled with tools and memories. I unlocked the camper shell and pulled out a heavy Pelican case. Inside was my old gear. My helmet with the USAR stickers, Katrina, Haiti, Joplin. My search cam, my structural marking paint. And most importantly, my handheld UHF radio. I clicked it on. Static hissed, then voices. "Engine 4 on scene. Heavy rescue required. Collapse is unstable. Requesting structural engineer immediately. Dispatch to Engine 4. All city engineers are deployed to the bridge failure downtown. ETA unknown. Do not enter the hot zone until stability is confirmed." My heart hammered against my ribs. Do not enter. That meant they would wait. They would stand there and watch the pile shift while my friends suffocated. I grabbed my laptop and synced it to the radio frequency, running a spectral analysis program I hadn't used since I left the task force. I needed to know exactly what was happening inside that pile. The sun began to set, casting long, bloody shadows across the dust-choked city. I sat on my tailgate, monitoring the comms, taking notes. Hour 4, the fire captain requested a crane. Denied. Too dangerous without an engineer's approval. Hour 12, night fell. The temperature dropped. I wrapped myself in a blanket, shivering not from cold but from fury. I could see floodlights illuminating the site, turning the dust into ghostly fog. Hour 24, silence. No sounds from the pile. The golden day, the first 24 hours where survival rates are highest, was gone. I didn't sleep. I drank lukewarm coffee from a thermos and watched Gabriel White give an interview to a news crew at the perimeter. He looked solemn, concerned. "We are doing everything we can," he lied. "Safety is our top priority." I zoomed in with my binoculars. He was smiling at the reporter when the camera cut away. Hour 48, the second night. A deep, grinding noise echoed from the site. The pile had settled. The firefighters shouted, backing away. "Structure is shifting." A voice cracked over the radio. "Pull back. Everyone out of the collapse zone." They were giving up on the rescue. It was turning into a recovery operation. I slammed my fist against the truck bed. Tears stung my eyes, hot and angry. I knew the void spaces. I knew the load paths. I could have told them exactly where to shore it up. I checked my phone again. 1 bar. I tried Aaron's number again. It rang. Once. Twice. Voicemail box full. I threw the phone onto the passenger seat. 72 hours. That was the limit for dehydration in a crush injury. After that, survival dropped to near zero. I looked at my watch. It had been 51 hours. I needed a different way in. If I couldn't physically be on the pile, I had to be a ghost in the machine. I pulled out my old acoustic sensors, seismic listening devices we used to find heartbeats in rubble. They were outdated, heavy, and illegal for a civilian to place on an active disaster site. Perfect. I waited until the shift change at 3:00 a.m. The site was quieter now, an eerie stillness hanging over the tragedy. The exhausted firefighters were swapping out, heads low. Security was lax. Miller was probably asleep in the guard shack. I slipped through a hole in the fence I'd spotted earlier, a weak point I had reported to Gabriel 3 weeks ago and he had ignored. The irony burned. I crept through the shadows, moving like a shadow myself. I reached the backside of the collapse, away from the floodlights. The smell of pulverized concrete and ruptured sewage lines was overpowering. I placed the first sensor on a protruding rebar, then the second, 10 feet away on a slab. I wired them to a wireless transmitter I'd rigged up. Back in my truck, I put on my headphones and booted up the audio software. At first, just the wind, then the distant rumble of a generator, and then, tap, 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 I froze, tap, 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 3 taps, pause, 3 taps, the universal SOS code for trapped miners and rescue workers. "William," I whispered, "you stubborn old mule." I adjusted the frequency, filtering out the background noise. Water. A faint, raspy voice. It wasn't William, it was higher. "Quinn," I gasped. I grabbed my radio. I didn't care about regulations anymore. I keyed the mic on the emergency channel. "Command, this is a remote observer," I said, disguising my voice. "I am picking up a positive tap code from Sector 4, Grid C coordinates, north side of the retaining wall, depth approximately 12 feet. "Who is this?" the dispatcher demanded. "Identify yourself. That frequency is restricted." "Did you hear me?" I snapped. "Tap code, 3 beats. Someone is alive in the void space." "Ma'am, we have cleared that sector with thermal imaging. Negative heat signatures. Clear the channel." "Thermal won't see through 4 feet of concrete." I screamed at the radio. "Send a team to the north wall. Now." Disconnecting unauthorized signal. Static, they cut me off. I stared at the radio in disbelief. They were letting them die because a computer screen said it was empty. I looked at the waveform on my laptop. The tapping was getting weaker. Tap, tap. I couldn't wait for Aaron. I couldn't wait for permission. I had to make them listen. I grabbed my phone and opened the local news station's tip line app. I uploaded the audio file of the tapping. I added a caption, "They are alive. Rescue TEAMS pulled back. Meridian construction director lying to families. Listen to the TAPS." I hit send. 10 minutes later, my phone buzzed. It wasn't the news. It was an unknown number. "You're persistent, Claire," a deep voice said. It wasn't Gabriel. It sounded tired, gravelly, and familiar. "Who is this?" "Turn around." I spun in my seat. A black SUV with government plates had pulled up silently behind my truck. The window rolled down. A man with silver hair and a face lined with exhaustion looked out. He was wearing a windbreaker with the state emergency management seal. "Aaron," I breathed. Aaron Clark stepped out of the SUV. He looked older than the rookie cop I'd pulled from the twisted metal of the I-95 bridge collapse 20 years ago, but the intensity in his eyes hadn't changed. He didn't smile. He walked over to my truck, leaned against the door, and looked at my laptop screen. "Is that real?" he asked, pointing to the waveform. "Live feed," I said, handing him the headphones. "Listen." He put them on. He closed his eyes. For a long minute he stood there motionless. Then his eyes snapped open. "Rhythmic," he said. "Human." "It's Quinn," I said, my voice shaking. "She's an intern, 22 years old. And William, the foreman." Gabriel White fired me 3 minutes before the collapse because I tried to stop the pour. Then he kicked me off the site when I tried to initiate a rescue. Aaron took off the headphones. His expression darkened. He fired the only USAR tech on site during a mass casualty event. Yes, and now command is pulling back because they think it's a recovery. They think they're dead, Aaron. Aaron pulled a cigar from his pocket but didn't light it. He just rolled it between his fingers, a nervous tick I remembered. The governor has declared a state of emergency, Aaron said quietly. That gives me broad powers. But technically, this is still a private site until I federalize it. That takes paperwork, time we don't have. I don't need paperwork, I said. I need you to get me back on that pile without getting arrested. I need you to override the fire captain and force them to re-enter. Aaron looked at the Meridian site, at the floodlights and the dust. You saved my life, Claire, he said softly. I've never forgotten that. I owe you a life. I'm cashing it in, I said, right now. He nodded once, sharp, decisive. Grab your gear, he said. You're not going in as a civilian, you're going in as my consultant, special deputy to the state director. I felt a surge of adrenaline. Let's go. One more thing, Aaron said, pausing. This Gabriel White, is he the type to lawyer up? He's the type who films the damage for insurance before checking for survivors. Aaron's lips thinned into a grim line. Good, because when we're done with the rescue, I'm going to enjoy taking him apart. He reached into his SUV and pulled out a yellow vest with state director on the back. He tossed it to me. Put that on, and Claire. Yeah. Don't ask for permission this time, just save them. I pulled the vest on. It felt like armor. We walked toward the gate together. The security guard, Miller, saw us coming. He saw the state seal on the SUV, the vest on me, and the look on Aaron's face. He opened the gate without a word. Gabriel White was standing near the command tent, arguing with the fire chief. He saw me and his face went purple. I told you. He shouted, storming toward us. I told you to stay away. Officer, arrest this woman. She is trespassing. Aaron stepped in front of me. He didn't shout. He just held up a badge. I'm Director Clark, State Emergency Management, Aaron said, his voice cutting through the noise like a knife. And this is my lead structural specialist. If you say one more word to her, Mr. White, I will have you removed from your own site for interfering with a federal rescue operation. Gabriel froze, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. Claire, Aaron said, not looking back, go to work. I ran past Gabriel, past the stunned firefighters, and straight for the pile. The silence was over. Kill the feeds. Gabriel's voice screeched, high and panicked, cutting through the heavy drone of the generators. I ignored him. I was already 30 feet up the debris pile, my boots finding purchase on slick, rebar-laced concrete. Aaron was down below, a monolithic force field between me and the corporate machinery trying to grind this rescue to a halt. You can't film this. Gabriel was shouting at a cameraman who had slipped through the perimeter with Aaron's entourage. This is private property. Liability waiver. Turn it off. Aaron stepped into Gabriel's personal space. Mr. White, this is a state-declared disaster zone. The press stays. The cameras stay. Unless you want to explain to the governor why you're obstructing transparency during a rescue operation. Gabriel paled, his eyes darting to the red record light on the camera. He snapped his mouth shut, but his hands were trembling as he typed furiously on his phone. I reached the void opening I had identified earlier. It was tighter than I remembered. The aftershocks had shifted the slab another 3 inches. I pulled out my laser rangefinder. The gap was narrowing. Command to Martin, Aaron's voice crackled in my earpiece. Status. Void access is compromised, I reported, keeping my voice level. I need hydraulic shoring immediately, and I need a listening probe. Copy, Fire Rescue 3 is deploying with gear. ETA 2 minutes. 2 minutes, it felt like 2 years. I peered into the darkness. Quinn, William, can you hear me? Silence. Then a faint tap, tap. They're still there, I whispered. The fire crew arrived, looking skeptical but moving fast under Aaron's direct orders. The captain, a grizzled veteran named Miller, no relation to the security guard, eyed me warily. "You sure about this, lady?" He grunted, setting down a hydraulic jack. My thermal scans showed nothing. "Your thermal scans bounce off 4 feet of high-density concrete," I snapped, grabbing the jack. "Set it here, and here, we need to create a safe tunnel." Miller hesitated, then nodded. "All right, let's do it." As we worked, the site grew eerily quiet. The heavy machinery had stopped to allow for the acoustic search. In that silence, I heard Gabriel's voice drift up from the command tent below. "Contain the narrative." "Yes, I know, just draft the statement." "Regrettable loss of life due to unforeseen geological event." "No, don't mention the cure times. Seal the records." My blood ran cold. Regrettable loss of life. He was already writing their obituaries while I was fighting to save them. He was managing the PR fallout of a tragedy that hadn't even finished happening. "Aaron," I keyed the mic, "record everything. He's burying the evidence." "Way ahead of you, Claire," Aaron replied. "The state attorney general is on the line." A news helicopter buzzed overhead, its spotlight cutting through the gloom. Gabriel pointed up at it, screaming into his phone, "Get them out of the airspace. FAA restriction. Now." He was trying to create a blackout, a total information void where he could spin the story, blame the earthquake, and hide the negligence. But he forgot one thing. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I snapped a photo of the shoring operation, the dust-covered firefighters, and the gaping maw of the collapse. I posted it to the local community page with a simple caption, "Rescue in progress. They are alive. We are coming." It wasn't just a rescue anymore. It was a war for the truth. We were 10 feet into the tunnel now. The space was claustrophobic, a jagged throat of broken stone and twisted metal. The air was thick with dust and the metallic tang of adrenaline. "Hold up," Miller whispered, holding up a hand. "Did you hear that?" A groan, low, deep, terrifying, the structure above us settled, dust rained down on our helmets. "Stabilize," I shouted. "Strut at 2 o'clock." We jammed another hydraulic strut into place, the metal groaning in protest. The ceiling held. Barely. I shone my light on the exposed rebar of the collapsed slab above us. Something looked wrong. The color of the concrete was off, too pale, too crumbly. I pulled out my multi-tool and scraped at the surface. A chunk of concrete the size of my fist broke off effortlessly. It shouldn't have done that. This was supposed to be 5,000 psi structural grade. "Miller," I said, my voice tight, "look at this aggregate." He shone his light. "That looks like limestone mix." "It's filler," I said, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. "It's cheap, non-structural filler. They cut the mix with limestone to save money. That's why it crumbled." "Jesus," Miller breathed. "This whole building is a house of cards." "Gabriel knew," I said, thinking back to the arguments over the budget, the efficiency experts he brought in. "He knew the mix was substandard. That's why he didn't want the rescuers in here. He didn't want us to see the inside of the failure." "Help." The voice was faint but distinct. "Quinn," I yelled. "Quinn, we're here. Keep talking." My legs stuck. Her voice was weak, terrified. "William, he's not waking up." "Hang on, honey," I said, crawling forward. "We're coming." I squeezed through a narrow gap between 2 slabs. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness and landed on a yellow vest. Quinn was pinned from the waist down under a massive beam. Her face was gray with dust and shock, but her eyes were open. Beside her, slumped against the wall, was William. His eyes were closed. "William," I reached out, checking for a pulse. Faint, thready, but there. "Medic," I shouted back down the tunnel. 2 patients. 1 critical, 1 entrapment. Get the airbags. "Claire," Quinn whispered, grabbing my hand. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "You came back." "I never left, kid," I choked out. "I just had to go get the right tools." Outside, I heard shouting. Angry, panicked shouting. "You cannot go in there. That area is condemned." Gabriel's voice. "Step aside, sir." Aaron's voice, thunderous, then a new sound, a dull thump thump thump. What is that? Quinn asked, eyes wide. It's the crane, I realized with horror. He's moving the crane. Why? Miller asked, crawling up beside me. To secure the site, I said, the blood draining from my face. He's going to drop a stabilization weight on the pile to stop it from shifting. He thinks we're just recovering bodies. If he drops that weight, Miller said grimly, this whole tunnel collapses. Command, I screamed into my radio. Abort crane operation. We have survivors. Repeat, survivors, abort. Static, command, do you copy? Nothing, the radio signal was being jammed, or blocked. He cut the repeater, I said, staring at the dead radio. He cut the comms. I looked at Miller. Stay with them, keep them alive, I have to stop that crane. You can't go back out there, Miller argued. The tunnel isn't stable. If I don't, we're all dead, I said. Keep Quinn talking, don't let William sleep. I scrambled back the way I came, tearing my uniform on rebar, bruising my knees on concrete. I burst out of the tunnel mouth into the blinding glare of the floodlights. The crane was swinging a massive concrete block over the rescue site. Gabriel was standing by the operator's cab, hand on the door, shouting instructions. Aaron was being held back by 2 security guards, new ones, private contractors Gabriel must have called in. Stop! I screamed, running toward them. Stop the crane. Gabriel turned. He saw me, covered in dust and blood, alive. His eyes widened, not with relief, but with pure, unadulterated fear. Drop it! Gabriel yelled at the operator. Stabilize the pile now. Don't do it, I roared, sprinting. There are survivors in the tunnel. You will kill them. The operator hesitated, his hand hovering over the lever. He looked from Gabriel to me. She's lying. Gabriel shrieked. She's hysterical. Drop the weight or you're fired. I tackled Gabriel. I hit him with every ounce of frustration and rage I had held back for 2 days. We went down in a heap of expensive wool and dust. I pinned him to the ground, my forearm against his throat. Call it off. I screamed in his face. Call it off or so help me God. Security. Gabriel gagged, clawing at my face. Aaron broke free from the guards. He didn't run to me. He ran to the crane operator. Shut it down. Aaron ordered, flashing his badge. State Director, shut down this engine immediately. The operator took one look at Aaron, then at Gabriel pinned in the dirt, and killed the engine. The massive block swung harmlessly in the air, 20 feet above the rescue tunnel. Silence fell over the site again, heavy, suffocating silence. I stood up, panting, dusting off my hands. Gabriel scrambled backward, looking like a cornered rat. You assaulted me, he hissed, touching his throat. That's assault. You're going to jail. No, Aaron said, walking over to stand beside me. She just performed a citizen's arrest for attempted negligent homicide. What? Gabriel laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. You're insane. I was following safety protocols. The pile was unstable. We found the concrete, Gabriel, I said, my voice deadly calm. We found the limestone filler. We know why it fell. Gabriel stopped laughing. The color drained from his face completely. And, I continued, pointing to the tunnel, we found them. Quinn and William are alive, and they're going to tell everyone exactly what happened up there before the floor gave way. Gabriel looked at the tunnel, then at the crane, then at the gathered crowd of firefighters and police who were now staring at him with open hostility. I didn't know, he stammered. I was just managing the risk. You weren't managing risk, Aaron said, pulling a pair of handcuffs from his belt. You were managing liability, and you just failed. He clicked the cuffs onto Gabriel's wrists. Gabriel White, Aaron said, you are being detained pending a federal investigation into the collapse of the Meridian Heights structure. You have the right to remain silent. I suggest you start using it. As they led him away, I didn't feel triumph. I just felt tired. Claire. Miller's voice crackled over a handheld radio. A firefighter had tossed me a fresh one. We got 'em. They're coming out. I turned back to the pile, the most beautiful sight in the world, a stretcher emerging from the dust. The sirens were a distant lullaby as I sat on the back of an ambulance, watching the paramedics load Quinn and William. Quinn was pale but conscious, gripping my hand like a lifeline as they lifted her stretcher. William was sedated, his leg stabilized in a splint, but alive. "You're a stubborn woman, Claire," William had whispered before the morphine took hold. "Runs in the family," I'd replied, tears finally stinging my eyes. Aaron walked over, 2 coffees in hand. He looked exhausted, the lines on his face deeper than I remembered, but there was a grim satisfaction in his posture. "He's in custody," Aaron said, handing me a cup. "But his lawyers are already circling like sharks. They're claiming Good Samaritan protections for his actions during the initial collapse, saying he was overwhelmed and trying to secure the perimeter for public safety." I took a sip of the lukewarm coffee. It tasted like heaven. He tried to drop a 10-ton block on survivors to hide the cheap concrete. "We know that, but proving intent is hard." His legal team is arguing that without an official structural report, which, conveniently, was on the server in the trailer that collapsed, he couldn't have known about the limestone filler. "The report wasn't in the trailer," I said quietly. Aaron looked at me. "What?" "I keep backups," I said, tapping the hard drive in my pocket. "Every safety inspection, every core sample test, every email where he authorized the cheaper mix over my objections. I have digital copies of everything." Aaron's eyebrows shot up. "You saved the data." "I'm a safety officer, Aaron. Redundancy is my religion." He actually smiled then, a real, genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Well then, that changes the conversation considerably, but there's still the issue of your firing." "He fired me before the collapse," I said. "Technically, I was trespassing when I saved them." "Technically," Aaron agreed, "but there's a little-known clause in the state's Emergency Management Act. Section 404. Any certified emergency responder who acts in good faith during a declared disaster is granted temporary immunity from civil liability and trespassing charges, provided their actions are consistent with preservation of life." Meaning you weren't trespassing, Claire. You were deputized by the state of California the moment I handed you that vest. And since I declared the emergency retroactive to the initial quake. He paused, letting the implications sink in. "Gabriel fired a state official in the performance of their duties," I finished. "Exactly. That's a felony obstruction charge, on top of the negligence, on top of the reckless endangerment." I looked at the flashing lights of the police cruiser where Gabriel was sitting, arguing with his lawyer through the window. "He's going to lose everything," I whispered. "No," Aaron corrected. "He already lost everything the moment he valued the building over the people inside it. We're just doing the paperwork." 2 weeks later, I sat across from a team of Meridian Construction's corporate lawyers in a sleek, glass-walled conference room. The air conditioning was freezing. My attorney, a shark named Rodriguez that Aaron had recommended, sat beside me looking bored. Gabriel wasn't there. He was out on bail but stripped of his passport and currently confined to his penthouse while the DA built the case. MS. Martin, the lead lawyer, a woman with hair so stiff it could withstand a hurricane, began. "We are prepared to offer a generous severance package. 6 months' salary, plus full benefits, in exchange for a non-disclosure agreement regarding the structural anomalies at the Meridian site." She slid a piece of paper across the table. The number was large, life-changingly large. I looked at it. Then I looked at Rodriguez. He didn't blink. "The structural anomalies," I said, my voice steady, "killed 3 people in the initial collapse and nearly killed 2 more. The anomalies were a deliberate choice to use non-structural filler to save 15% on materials." "Allegedly," the lawyer corrected smoothly. "That has not been proven in court." "It's in the emails," I said, tapping the folder in front of me. "The ones I provided to the grand jury this morning." The lawyer stiffened. "You provided." "Subpoenaed evidence," Rodriguez interjected smoothly. "Ms. Martin is a cooperating witness. Any attempt to silence her with an NDA would be witness tampering." The lawyer's face went from professional to panicked in a microsecond. She looked at her colleagues, who were furiously checking their tablets. Furthermore, I continued, enjoying the moment, I'm not interested in your severance. I'm interested in your insurance policy. Excuse me. The site liability policy, I said, Clause 12, Section B. Coverage is void if the insured party knowingly violates state or federal safety regulations resulting in catastrophic failure. Gabriel White knew. He ordered it, which means your insurance carrier isn't going to pay out a dime for the collapse. The room went deathly silent. That means, I said, leaning forward, that Meridian Construction is personally liable for every medical bill, every funeral cost, and every civil suit that comes from this. And since Gabriel White is a named officer, he's personally liable too, Rodriguez finished with a shark-like grin. Piercing the corporate veil, we're going after his assets, his stocks, his house, everything. The lead lawyer closed her folder. Her hands were trembling slightly. We need a recess, she said, standing up abruptly. Take all the time you need, I said. I'm not going anywhere. As they filed out, looking like they were marching to their own execution, I felt a weight lift off my chest that I hadn't realized I was carrying. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice. Quinn was going to walk again. William was going to retire with dignity. And Gabriel White was going to spend the rest of his life paying for the corners he cut. The sun was setting over my back porch, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple that reminded me of bruising, but in a good way. The healing kind. I took a sip of iced tea and looked out at the garden. It was overgrown, wild, and alive, just like me. My phone buzzed on the table, a text from Quinn, walking without the cane today. PT says I'm a machine. Coffee next week. I smiled and typed back, you're on my treat. William had retired to Florida with a settlement that would keep his grandkids in college. He sent me postcards of flamingos and alligators every week. Gabriel White was currently awaiting trial on 3 counts of involuntary manslaughter and 20 counts of criminal negligence. His assets were frozen. His reputation was ashes. The last I heard, he was being represented by a public defender because his private counsel had withdrawn for non-payment. Meridian Construction had filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. The site was being demolished, properly this time, by a union crew that followed every safety protocol to the letter. I was working again, but not for a developer. I was teaching. The local technical college had hired me to run their construction safety program. I was training the next generation of safety officers, kids like Quinn who needed to know that a clipboard could be a shield if you held it right. And Aaron, we had dinner every Sunday. We didn't talk about the past much. We talked about the future, about fishing trips we'd never taken, about books we wanted to read. He was retiring next year. He asked me if I wanted to go with him to see the Grand Canyon. I told him I'd think about it,